Namaste, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre, London. Now, some may think of Nehru Centre as just this beautiful, fine building, and it is a fine building, no doubt. We have a wonderful art gallery out here. We have an awesome auditorium on the first floor with a capacity of 100 to 120 people right here in the heart of central London, in Mayfair. But the Nehru Centre is a lot more than this fine building. The Nehru Centre is also an online platform. We are available on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And so the Nehru Centre is actually wherever you want it to be. Of course, we'd love for you to come to the physical events that we organize out here when we do organize them. But do join all our online platforms as well. This is a hybrid world. We are going to have offline physical events and online events as well. So do join our online platforms and do keep giving us feedback of what you think of it. We'd love to host you out there. We'd love to hear what you think of our events, and do keep sending in your suggestions as well. We do keep imbibing and learning from the feedback that you give to us to give you programs that you guys might enjoy. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Namaste. Jai Hind. Namaste, my name is Amish Tripathi and I'm the director of the Nehru Centre. This is our first online event in this new year of 2022, and we are delighted that we are hosting an event celebrating one of the greatest Indians of the previous century, indeed one of the greatest human beings of the previous century, Swami Vivekananda ji. Who is considered by most to also be one of the makers of modern India. We will be discussing Swamiji's legacy, what modern India and the world can learn from him, and we couldn't have put together a better panel than the one that is coming up in front of you shortly. Dr. Hindol Sengupta and Swami Sarvasthananda. If I may just introduce the two of them briefly, and then I will leave the proceedings over to them. So first, Dr. Hindol Sengupta. Dr. Hindol Sengupta is the author of 9 books, including a best-selling biography of Swami Vivekananda called The Modern Monk. He is the only Indian to win the Wilbur Award given by the Religion Communicators Council of America for his best-selling book, Being Hindu. He is also the only Indian to be shortlisted for the Hayek Prize given by the Manhattan Institute in memory of the Nobel laureate, economist F.A. Hayek. His last book, The Man Who Saved India, a biography of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, won the Value of Words Award for Best Non-Fiction Book of the Year 2019. He was educated in South Asian history and politics as a Chevening Scholar at the University of Oxford, in business and finance as a Knight Bagehot Fellow at Columbia University, and holds a doctorate in international relations from the Geneva School of Diplomacy. He's a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and Vice President and Head of Research at Investment India, the National Investment Promotion Agency of the Government of India. Truly an accomplished and regarded and awarded scholar. And he will be hosting the conversation with Swamiji, who I will introduce to you shortly. Swami Sarvasthananda is the Minister in charge of Ramakrishna Vedanta Centre, born in Buckinghamshire in the UK, right here near London, and the only branch of the well-known international organization Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission in the UK. As I'm sure you all know, the Ramakrishna Mission Mutt was organized, founded by Swami Vivekananda ji, and carries forward his ideals across the world. Swamiji is also the editor of the bi-monthly Vedanta, published from there. After completing his graduation in engineering, he joined the Ramakrishna Mission Order at the headquarters at Belur Mutt near Kolkata in February 1987. Swami Sarvasthananda tours extensively all over the globe, preaching the universal message of Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, Vedanta, India's cultural and spiritual heritage, inter-religious harmony, and on other topics in various fora. He has also contributed many articles on various topics in English and Gujarati in many journals. Swami Sarvasthananda represented the Ramakrishna Mission in the UNESCO Conference on Youth and Their Social Impact held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in May 2017, and also represented the organization again in UNESCO events held in Tunisia and Paris in September and December 2018, respectively. Since June 2017, he has been appointed as one of the three official monastic representatives of the Ramakrishna Mission to the UNESCO events wherever and whenever they are held in different countries around the world. Truly a wonderful guest to expound on Swami Vivekananda ji's message. Over to you, Hindol.
Namaste and a very warm welcome. It is such an auspicious day to be joining one of my favorite centers around the world, the wonderful Nehru Center, led by my dear friend Amish Tripathi at the moment. The Nehru Center in London, of course, for years has been such a wonderful host to so many cultural activities all around the theme of India. Today, on Swami Vivekananda's birthday, which is celebrated in India as National Youth Day, I am absolutely thrilled as the biographer of Swami Vivekananda. My book on him is called The Modern Monk, to join one of the most learned voices explaining the belief system, the spirituality, the great devotional processes, and most importantly, the wonderful, enthusiastic, motivational ideas of Swami Vivekananda, not just for the young in India, but for around the world. Swami Sarvasthananda, he of course is the head of the Ramakrishna Mission Center, the Vedanta Center in London, in the UK, should I say, because the center is actually slightly away from London in Bourne End. And I'm absolutely delighted. During my time at Oxford, of course, I had the great privilege of interacting with Swamiji, Swami Sarvasthananda, and actually visiting this wonderful center and talking about all the wonderful things that Swami Vivekananda did in the West. I'm joined by Swami Sarvasthananda to talk about Swami Vivekananda's motivational idea. And at the moment, I would like to bring Swami Sarvasthananda onto our screen, and he's just joined us. Thank you, Swamiji, for joining us.
Nice to meet you.
Swamiji, I wondered if you want to begin a little bit talking about really Swami Vivekananda's idea of bringing nations and cultures together, bringing diverse elements from around the world, great disparities, together in a common pool of harmony. At a time when the world is particularly divided, not least by the by the COVID virus and its vaccination processes, many people are being left behind in this entire process. Swami Vivekananda seemed to have a unique message of really equality, equanimity, and togetherness. I'm wondering if you would like to begin a little as we begin this conversation on that theme.
Yes. So, first of all, I'm very happy to see you after a long time. Uh, and this particular idea, which you mentioned, was very dear to him. And he believed London was the place, at least when he came here, he believed that London was the place where these universal ideas will take shape, because English was the language where his universal Vedantic ideas, as interpreted and lived by his own master, would find a wonderful uh, play. I mean, it would germinate here much better than any other place in the world. So I'm very happy that this particular concept of unity in diversity, at not at the gross level, but you go to the root level, at the level of the spirit. So he believed that that would be the solution, a panacea for all the evils that we are facing. Right through history, we have been encountering a lot of problems. We have faced a lot of problems, pandemics included. But and he puts it so nicely in a very small paragraph, which I'll quote. He says uh, so beautifully that the basis of all systems, social or political, rests upon the goodness of men. No nation is great or good because parliament enacts this or that, but because its men are great and good. Religion or spirituality goes to the root of the matter. If that is right, everything else is right. Then he says, especially this message will be very useful and relevant to the youth, not only in India but all over the world. He says, I direct my attention to the individual, to make him strong, to teach him that he is divine, and I call upon men to make themselves conscious of this divinity within. That is the really the ideal, conscious or unconscious of every religion. And specifically for the youth, he believed that a man making religion is what we want to explore the human possibilities. What do you mean by expressing divinity within? It simply means that there are wonderful human possibilities, most of which we have not even explored. We have at the physical level, youths aspire to develop a strong physical body. We go a little higher, they want to develop academically, they want to develop intellectually. But when Swamiji says man making religion, he says there are other possibilities as well. And that man making is what he spoke of, especially to the youth. And it's a universal idea. Diverse cultures, diverse religions, irrespective of caste, creed, even gender. This is a big issue now. Diversity uh, in all over the world leads to conflict, leads to problems, leads to all sorts of troubles. But Swamiji made it, Swami Vivekananda said that in spite of the diversity, not that we have to remove diversity, diversity will remain. But the unity, the basis of unity is the goodness of men, or the inherent or potential divinity that is within each human being. And that's why he said, I want a man making education. And he said, this is the test of truth. This is one of the most universal ideas he expressed, which can be used by, or which can inspire the youth all over the world. He says, here is the test of truth. Anything that makes you weak physically, intellectually, or spiritually, you have to reject it as poison. There's no life in it. Because if it is truth, truth is always strengthening. Truth is purity, truth is all knowledge. Truth must be strengthening, it must be enlightening, and it must be invigorating. So that's the idea. So he says that for a universal personality, especially for the youth, this man making education, as he defined it, alone can make a truly universal personality. So he believed that science and religion, reason and faith, secular and the sacred, modern and the ancient, east and the west, they all got unified in his own wonderful personality. He was the personification of this unification, this universal personality. And that is the ideal which he spread broadcast. Of course, he spoke about it to the youth of his own nation, India, after he returned from his wonderful tour of the West. But wherever he got a chance, I believe the youth of the world, the global youth, were inspired by his message. Most of his disciples, if you see, whether it was America, even the wonderful disciples he got, Sister Navidita, they were all young people. He himself was a youth icon, and he caught the minds of the most dynamic or wonderful youth of each country. And wherever he went, whichever country he visited, even Europe, but England was a place, United Kingdom was the place where he got some of his core workers who uh, took forward, I mean, who carried this mission forward, because he passed away, as all of you know, he died as a youth. He was hardly 39 years, 6 months when he passed away, when he entered into Mahasamadhi. But after that, it is the youth whom he inspired in the UK. At least four wonderful people who took this message forward, this idea of unity in diversity, and spread it all over the world. So that is what I feel. It's a very relevant thing, not only in those days, but it is more relevant today when there are so many, when we are, the whole world has become a global village. So it's more
Right.
relevant today than it was during his day.
And that's exactly the point. For people who may be joining us and watching us who may not know enough about Swami Vivekananda, here's a quick nugget. Here is a boy really who was born in colonially ruled India, who received education under the British system, so to speak, who went to school and college in Calcutta. Was not a great student, but in fact was an extremely gifted intellectual. So his mind always moved almost beyond the limitations of his books into truly trying to understand the world, and much more importantly the deeper sense of self within him. So this boy grows up and begins to ask very deep philosophical questions, begins to ask if anybody has actually seen God, begins to ask if there is God, if God exists, and if God does exist, what does God look like? Finally, after much searching, finds really this unlettered yogic master in Ramakrishna Paramhans, Thakur, as he's often called, and this intellectual boy and this devoted spiritual master, an unlettered village man, develop this tremendous spiritual relationship. And soon enough, this boy grows up into a young man, and then travels the length and breadth of India, and then travels across in the West and gives that famous in 1893 on September 11th a rousing speech at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, which defines in many, many ways the very sense of Indian culture, civilization, and Hindu thought in the West and around the world. And of course, creates this wonderful movement. And as Swamiji was saying, Swami Sarvasthananda was saying, dies only at around 39 years, 6 months. During this time, of course, Swami Vivekananda revolutionizes the way the world looks at India and the way India has looked at herself in the modern times. Swamiji, one of the things that really impressed me, and we have been lifelong sort of followers of Swami Vivekananda, is his inherent modernity. He seemed to, and you mentioned a little bit about him mixing the East and the West within
Yes.
his self, right? Swami Vivekananda is a quintessential modern character and there at a very basic level also, right? He's an English speaking monk. He is well versed not only in the ancient scriptures of India but English literature. He's deeply interested in food. He reads voraciously French and English cookbooks in America, in England, in France, in Germany. He's keenly interested in history, in science and technology. So he in many ways is a Renaissance man, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yet, of course, he's deeply connected to Indian spirituality. Part of the charm of him today must truly be this, right? I mean, he's a Renaissance, almost a Renaissance man-like character for us.
Exactly. So he was the personification of his own message. He had some wonderful generalizations to make about how the world has progressed, and especially he believed that each nation has a particular life mission. It cannot be the same for all nations. Every nation has its own peculiarity. But he generalized this to three basic thought trends, if you may call it as thought trends, or civilizations which have impacted humankind throughout history. So he was a wonderful generalizer. He didn't speak about particular nations and particular ethnicities and the contribution of different people all over the world, but he generalized the whole human history. He was a wonderful student of history as well as you said, and no doubt he was a student of literature as well. But he was a keen student of history, and he traveled widely. He was famously known as a monk on the move. The latter part of his life, especially the last 10 years of his life, I don't think he stayed in one place. He was constantly moving. He passed through the entire Europe. And if you see his wonderful travelogues, The East and the West, which he has written, it's a book everybody should read. 3 days in a country, he could judge the uh, essence or the core of that culture. Like Germany, he made so many wonderful predictions that what is going to happen in the future. Even predicted the World War One, which was nobody thought, which and even the rise of communism in countries which people never thought the communism would take its roots, Russia and China, much before they became communists. He said these ideas will impact humankind. So he generalizes the whole thing, his ideas, and he says civilization have been of three types. The first is the Roman, who have left a wonderful impact on the entire world. The second is the Greek, and the third is the Hindu or the Oriental. So he says, with this wonderful insight, he says the Roman type, which has left its impact on every country of the world, is the type of organization, conquest, political and administrative skills, steadiness, but they lack certain things. That is the emotional nature, appreciation of beauty and higher emotions. So they were not developed so much in the Roman culture. That's why he says its defect is cruelty. Then he says the Greek is essentially enthusiastic for the beautiful. The Greeks gave us all the sciences and arts. They are enthusiastic for the beautiful in life, in nature, in Prakriti. But they are their weakness was they were frivolous, and they had a tendency, that frivolous nature of theirs made the Greeks. There was a tendency in most of the people to become immoral. And then finally, he says the third great stream of thought or culture or civilization was the Hindu type, and that is essentially metaphysical and religious, but lacking in elements of organization and work. So Swamiji then summarizes the whole thing. He says the Roman type now is represented by the Anglo-Saxon, the Greek type more by the French than by any other nation. You see, he was a traveler. He traveled through the length and breadth of Europe, not only America, but the length and breadth of Europe, which you can say is the center or the core of modern Western civilization was built there. So he generalizes in such a beautiful way. He says the Greek type has been represented more by France or French than by any other nation. The Anglo-Saxons, of course, took the Roman type of uh, Roman culture more. And the old Hindus, he believed that they, wherever spirituality, people were inspired by spiritual thoughts, the Indian thought has gone there. Directly or indirectly, they have impacted the entire world. Even Buddhism and all the great religions were Oriental religions. Even Jesus Christ and all the Semitic religions as well. They somehow or the other, directly or indirectly, they belong to the Hindu type, not uh, politically or geographically. What he meant by Hindu type is the Oriental type. So he said the best thing that a modern youth or modern mankind can do is to appreciate or find out what are the advantages and disadvantages in these three streams of thought, and take the best of all the three. So we should have the Romans' power of organization, politics, administration, the power of Greeks' wonderful love for beautiful, love for nature. That's how they developed their sciences, the technology, and all those things. And then, but it will all be incomplete if the Hindus or the Oriental backbone of religion and love of God or spirituality, if they are missing. That's why he says finally that mix these up together, and then the we will be able to bring in a new civilization. So I think I've summarized what exactly he believed in, and that his life was a he just elaborated on what he believed to be the core mission of his life, to bring together the East and the West,
So,
taking
okay,
the
of
yeah,
course, Swami Vivekananda, you mentioned, of course, not his traveling around the world, not just in the UK and US, but also across Europe. And in that sense, Swami Vivekananda was truly one of the first global travelers from India,
exactly.
writing detailed travel journals of his own. Had he not been a monk, he could have well been a great traveler,
Yes,
making very detailed observations on culture, as you said, on society, on food, on dress, and so on and so forth. Always consistently curious. That's one of the things that I've always loved about him. His innate curiosity, coming as he did, and we have to keep reminding ourselves that he really came from a colonized country, right? And
exactly.
yet his mind was, almost uniquely open for the time that he belonged to, constantly confident. He did not show any shyness or any reticence of the colonized, right?
Yeah,
And I have written in essays that Swami Vivekananda, in a sense, was the confidence of the colonized. In spite of being colonized, in spite of being part of a colonized country, he still had an innate confidence to reach out and accept and embrace the world on his own terms,
exactly.
not by bowing his head or not by mindlessly embracing everything, but on his own terms. That is something which is really fascinating to me. I wonder if you could talk a little bit now about gender, because one of the things that most people don't realize about Swami Vivekananda is that he was probably modern India's first great feminist.
Exactly.
Here is a lifelong committed monk, committed to chastity, very importantly, to frugality, to to spirituality and to chastity, and yet coming from an order of monks, so to speak, or creating and creating his own order, of course, um, coming from a traditional society. But when he reaches out in the West, he is able to attract following across the board, and very importantly, key women. Most people may not remember or know that the Belur Mutt itself, one of the greatest spiritual centers that modern India has created, was built with the effort and money of Western women. So was the great and Swamiji's dream project in the Himalayan mountains, the Mayavati Advaita Vedanta Ashram, right?
Yes,
Entirely non-denominational, completely free and devoted to the ideas of the absolute spirituality. Again, built by the efforts of his women disciples from the West. And how can we forget Sister Nivedita, perhaps his greatest pupil? Again, a Western woman devoted to Indian spirituality and to helping India. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about these characters.
yes, yes. Oh, this is a unique uh, project of his, or you may say unique mission of his. This elevating, I would not use the word feminism or he's a feminist. It would be too trivial, because you see Betty Friedan, the feminine mystic, and all those books, they inspired the Western countries, and the suffragette movement here in England. Henrietta Muller, one who was his disciple, in fact wanted Swami Vivekananda to support her feminist movement. And though she was the one who donated a huge sum of money in those days, 39,000 was a rupees was a big amount. She was the one who gave money to Swami Vivekananda, who obviously had no resources, being a monk, to purchase the land on which the present Belur Mutt stands, the headquarters of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Ramakrishna Mission. So Henrietta Muller herself was a feminist. So Swami Vivekananda was not a feminist in that sense. He really wanted to elevate. When you talk of gender equality, in the Atman or in the soul, there is no gender involved. That has been one of the core Vedantic principles which his master. But his master did something else. His master Sri Ramakrishna did something more wonderful. In this particular manifestation, or we call him an avatar or an incarnation, his spiritual consort became the center of his mission after he passed away in 1886. That was pointed out by Swami Vivekananda. Many of his Guru Bhais and his brother disciples and householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna respected, venerated the Holy Mother Sri Ma Sharda Devi as she was known. But nobody realized that Sri Ramakrishna wanted her to become the center around which this women's empowerment movement, the true women's empowerment, would it would be centered around Holy Mother Sharda Devi. This was pointed out by Swami Vivekananda in one of his letters to his Guru Bhais. He said Sri Ramakrishna's message to the modern world is not just harmony of different faiths, harmony of different religions, but it is the message that uh, women women deserved a higher status because history has been not been very kind to womankind. So he came to elevate the life of a woman to that of the universal mother whom he worshipped, the divine mother as he called. So he worshipped his own spiritual consort that's unparalleled in the history of the world. And Swami Vivekananda said he came for this particular mission and he spelled it out how true spiritual empowerment of women. In fact, many people do not know that he planned the Sharda Mutt because in all other fields there were this gender disparity was being removed. I mean, in the socio-economic sphere, in the political sphere, there were people fighting for their rights, voting rights. It began with voting rights. They wanted to have a say in everything, but that was in the secular side. But in the religious uh, side, religious world, women were not empowered to become spiritual masters or gurus as they are known. We hardly heard of a woman leading a spiritual order, though you can hear of women CEOs. Now it is very common, even prime ministers and political leaders, economic leaders, scientists, but you will hardly find any order except the one which Swami Vivekananda started, the Sharda mission or the Sharda Mutt, which he started. Of course, he could not start it because his life was too short. But he mentioned to his disciples, I am more keen. I am keen to start the order for women first before I die, before even the men's order or Ramakrishna mission was started. But unfortunately, society was not very kind, especially in India. The gender bias was there, discrimination was there, women were not educated, and he could not garner the resources to start the Sharda Mutt. It happened in 1953. But Sri Ma Sharda Devi silently, she was the inspiration not only for Vivekananda but all his women disciples whom you spoke of. Just now you mentioned a few names: Sister Nivedita, Josephine McLeod, and then there's this Mayavati, the founder, the main inspiration behind Mayavati was Mrs. Charlotte Xavier. She and Captain Xavier left their country, sold their property in England in Finchley Road. They used to have a big mansion. They sold the entire property at one desire or wish of Swami Vivekananda. It started the only Advaita Ashrama in the Ramakrishna order where no formal worship, no rituals are allowed. Only truth and truth alone will be worshipped. Universal truth, free from all biases. No genders, no ethnicity, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, ethnicity, and even gender. So this Mayavati Advaita Ashram was a dream project of Swami Vivekananda, about which he dreamt when he was traveling in Switzerland, in Saas-Fee. I wish, he just mentioned casually, I just wish we had a beautiful place, a whole mountain for ourselves in the Himalayas, which is from where all the rishis and the Vedic culture has come out. So he said, he just expressed this wish, this Captain and Mrs. Xavier, especially Mother Xavier as she is known. She decided to immediately act upon Swamiji's small desire, and she sold Both of them sold their property, went and established the Mayavati Advaita Ashram. Henrietta Muller, on the other hand, she was also a great, though she was a feminist, she became a theosophist, and she in fact attended the Parliament of Religions, and she was inspired by Swamiji's universal message. She left theosophy and then uh, tried to help Swami Vivekananda by donating a huge amount. She was a very highly educated English lady, one of the first graduates of Cambridge University, Henrietta Miller, and she was a heiress to a vast estate left, and she owned several houses. Many of these houses are still there, and Swami Vivekananda lived in them. And when he came to London, he spent about 300 days. He spent a lot of time. She was his host along with Edward Sturdy, and that is how they laid the foundation of the movement in England. So Henrietta Muller, she was wealthy, and but she was, and she not only that, she because she was single, she was a spinster, she decided to adopt a child who was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda. People don't know this. Akshay Kumar Ghosh. She wanted to pay for for his education. She brought him to England and then educated him. And it was because of Akshay Kumar Ghosh that she came in touch with Swami Vivekananda, because Akshay Kumar Ghosh was a disciple of Swamiji. So she invited Swamiji because Akshay said, "My guru uh, is a wonderful spiritual teacher." Of course, she has later on she heard him at the Parliament of Religions as well. So he came, and that was Henrietta Muller's contribution. Then there is, of course, Sister Navidita. We all know how she contributed. In fact, she dedicated, the name Nivedita means the dedicated one. So she dedicated everything she had for Swami Vivekananda's mission, Vedanta mission, and also particularly his ideas to revive the Indian nation. And she inspired a host of people in India. We see her influence on Rabindranath Tagore, Avanindranath Tagore, one of the foremost painters of India, historians, Jadunath Sarkar, one of the famous historians. She inspired them to bring back that nationalistic culture and inspire these people. Aurobindo, of all, among other leaders, she was the one who protected him, guided him, and the great leader Aurobindo. And then there was Subramanya Bharati in the south, who became a great freedom fighter, and there were innumerable people who fought for our freedom and contributed in many ways towards you may say, the rejuvenation of art, culture, sciences. Jagdish Chandra Bose. She was so close to Jagdish Chandra Bose that she even helped him to write papers. When he came to Trinity College in Dublin, she arranged for his accommodation, helped him to, she practically helped him to present his papers. And she contributed because, and then there were other people also, the great biologist uh, uh, in who established an uh, institute in Almora. So many people, historians, scientists, even Jamshedji Tata, one who was inspired by Swamiji during their voyage. It was Jamshedji Tata who got inspiration from Sister Nivedita to uh, continue with this pet project of Indian Institute of Science. This Indian Institute of Science was actually a combined result of Jamshedji's desire and Nivedita's uh, inspiration. She inspired a lot of people to see that this project does not die, because that was Swamiji's dream. And she lived for 10 years after Swamiji passed away, almost 8 years, and she saw to it that all the incomplete projects of Swami Vivekananda, they were fulfilled. And of course, she wrote some beautiful books. So these are the three women whom you can say they were empowered in the true sense. And ultimately, Swami Vivekananda believed that feminism is fine, gender equality is fine, but true empowerment is incomplete without the spiritual empowerment of women. They need economic empowerment, they need political empowerment, social political empowerment, but first and foremost, we have to work for the spiritual empowerment of women. So that is his contribution, and these are the few wonderful women who came and helped his mission, and not only empowered themselves, but they are. And one more wonderful person I would like to mention. Nobody knows about. She is the aunt of Vikram Sarabhai. You might, people might not have heard her name. Her name is Ansuya Ben Sarabhai. She was born in 1885, the 1 year before Sri Ramakrishna attained Mahasamadhi. But she, as a small girl, was inspired by the Jnana Yoga and the song of the Sannyasin. Something unimaginable. A seventh class girl who was married off early at the age of 13. She broke her marriage. She said, I want to be independent. She was so inspired by the song of the Sannyasin. A woman inspired, she practically lived a monastic life, though she lived in the world, because in those days there was no order for women. Sharda Mat was not yet formed. She went to Mayavati and corresponded with Mayavati. She said, can I stay here as a nun? But they said, we don't have a nunnery right now. But she wanted to renounce the world. But then she dedicated her entire life. She inspired Ila Bhatt to start the first. In fact, she was the first woman to lead a trade union. It's very rare in India in those days. And not only that, she created one of the world's most powerful organization for women. It is known as Seva, Self-Employed Women's Association. It has more than 1 million members, not only in India, but in Africa and wherever there are women who have suffered this gender inequality. She has this movement, this Seva organization, which was inspired. She mentored Ila Bhatt, who ultimately started this organization. So Ansuya Ben Sarabhai also was a woman who had taken this inspiration from Swami Vivekananda, his works, and empowered herself not only to start this organization, but she was a highly spiritually developed. She, in fact, till the last day of her life, she used to read the Song of Sannyasin, a book which is meant to be read by monks. She used to read that every day, and she says that was my inspiration, the Jnana Yoga, which even monks find difficult to read. This woman was empowered politically, and she studied she was sent by her brother to the London School of Economics. She graduated from here, but went back to India and dedicated her whole life. So there are innumerable women. We cannot, in this small the limited time, we cannot discuss, but there are so many women who have showed what true women's empowerment is, as defined by Swamiji and as inspired by the wonderful life and message of Sri Ma Sharda Devi.
Fascinating. Indeed, as you say, even the word feminist is a sort of, or feminism is too small a word, perhaps, to encompass what Swami Vivekananda's vision for gender equality and gender empowerment and gender upliftment through
Exactly.
spiritual means really was. And in a sense, Swami Vivekananda's ideas of gender upliftment through spiritual means pre-existed or predated even the modern notion of feminism, which is a wonderful idea and a wonderful thought. I want to segue at the moment, Swamiji, into something else that you spoke about when you were talking about this aspect of Swami Vivekananda, into the Mayavati Ashram.
Exactly.
Now, the Mayavati Ashram, as many of us know, is nestled in the heart of the Himalayas, in the high Himalayas. Swami Vivekananda seems to have spent not only time in the Indian Himalayas in Kashmir, but also in what we today call Uttarakhand, right?
Yeah.
And he chose the high Himalayas to build this dream ashram of his, a refuge for all seekers of truth beyond any denominational strain, so to speak, completely devoted to truth, including many people don't know that this ashram, this wonderful ashram, is devoted to the idea of truth, including removing or it does not even have insignia of his own monastic order or of his
Exactly.
own spiritual guru, right?
Yes, yes.
It is so, in a sense, completely and holistically devoted to the idea of truth. I want you to talk a little bit, because it seems to me that this is almost what Swami Vivekananda built is what we need more of. Safe spaces. The word safe space is very in vogue at the moment, Swamiji. It seems to me that that is an ultimate safe space for people to come and contemplate their true reality beyond all signs, beyond all markers, beyond all insignia, all orders, all narrow paths, so to speak, right? I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about that, and also about Swami Vivekananda's love for the high Himalayas and nature.
Environment. Yeah. So this was a pet project of his. As I said, it was the captain savior who died after he reached Mayavathi. He lived for about 2 years. But before they came to Mayavathi, they were in Almora for 2 years. They were searching for a nice, because Swami Vivekananda had told him, I want an entire hill for myself. I mean, so that we can build a monastery where truth will be preached and people from all countries, different religious faiths, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, gender, ethnicities, they can come if if they are in search of truth, pure truth, unalloyed truth, not mixed with any rituals or any insignia, as you said. So he did not even allow the picture of his own master was the inspiration behind the Ramakrishna mission. So that center is known as Advaita Ashram. Advaita means non-dual. That is the highest truth our sages discovered in the wonderful Himalayas. That is the place where these truths were discovered. So if you go there now, the pristine purity of the forest, all the other forests nearby, the Kumaon area, if you feel so sad that you don't have that pristine forest there. But if you see this 200 acres of land which constitute the Mayavathi Advaita Ashram, you see so much of diversity, so much of greenery. And he believed in unless you respect Prakriti, that was one of his ideas, as you said, environmental issues, especially there are many issues now. People want to prevent indiscriminate exploitation of Mother Earth by people. This idea was there long ago when nature or Prakriti was equated with the Divine Mother. That's another aspect of this worship of God as the Mother, the Divine Mother, or Shakti. It is popularly this idea was developed. And according to Vedanta or in Indian philosophy, you will find that nature is always feminine. The Purusha, the ultimate consciousness, which illumines the entire nature, the soul or the truth which we are searching, has to be acquired by collaborating with nature. You can't fight with nature, fight with the environment, or exploit nature and expect nature to help you. So Swamiji believed that we go on exploiting nature with rapid strides, human being in the name of progress. They have effected changes continuously transported fauna and flora from one country to another. That's fine, artificially. Nature has its own way to propagate natural things, animals and other things, trees, plants, and other animals in degrees, in slow degrees. But wanton destruction, which humankind, because of man's greed, man's the exploitation of nature, which has resulted in environmental disaster and which may wipe off the human beings from the face of the earth. It is so dangerous, climate change and other things. So this was also one of the major issues. Though Advaita Ashrama, Swami Vivekananda believed that we cannot handle these issues at the superficial level. It would be just patchwork. We have these movements, where we say that environment has to be protected. But selfishness, unless the selfishness or greed from the human heart is eliminated, and this can be done by the idea of unity and unity alone. Not only unity between different human beings, different races, different cultures, but unity between animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and also human beings. We are all part of one unified creation. The diversity may be there. We may believe in Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, but competition, according to Swamiji, when a man evolves, this Darwin's theory does not hold true for superior human beings, for spiritual human beings. Their competition is not the rule. You don't just live in this world to survive. Otherwise, what's the difference between animals, plants, and human beings? Human being has evolved so that he can transcend this prakriti and become one with the purusha. The truth, that is what Advaita says. The one existence, universality can be established only if one can realize the inherent universality or the inherent unity behind all the diversity. So Prakriti always shows us diversity. If you respect Prakriti, if you respect Mother Nature, if you respect the Divine Mother, then she will be a positive force in your life to reach the culmination of your life, that is to reach the supreme consciousness where there is no duality. That is the truth of this Advaita Ashrama. And Swamiji believed that people will come from all parts of the world, in no matter, uh, uh, I mean, irrespective of whether they belong to a ritualistic sect or a sect which worships, they can come, all can come. But when they come here, when they come to Mayavati, it will be the worship of truth and truth alone, the universal principle. That is why he said to his disciples who felt that he is not preaching Sri Krishna enough. They thought, he says, what will I gain by preaching another personality? It is his principles, Sri Krishna's principles, my master's principles, which were as broad as the sky and as deep as the ocean. He says, when ideas are deep as the ocean, people tend to become fanatic. They are very fanatic about what they believe in, and that results in conflict. But if you are as broad as the sky, then that all inclusiveness sometimes reduces the impact of your message. That fanaticism goes, and people believe that if you are not fanatical, you can't propagate. But Sri Krishna showed that while respecting diversity, you can also focus on the unity, that is truth. That is what Advaita Ashrama stands for. It does not uh, want to destroy diversity. It does not say these things are wrong. You travel from lower truth to higher truth. The highest truth is Advaita, but all other steps are uh, not only should be tolerated, but they should be accepted as true, because mankind never travels from error to truth, but it travels from lower truth to higher truth. So everybody was welcome, or even is welcome there, irrespective of his religious affiliation, the faith, and the beliefs that he has. He can come, but the only condition is here he should be a votary or a follower of truth, and truth, the pure truth alone, which does not make for any distinction. The supreme Brahman, as it is known as the Vedanta, which is the goal of every individual, which should be the goal of every individual. So he says, he told his disciples, I can sacrifice everything, even all the great movements that he started, all the wonderful work he started. He said, I can sacrifice everything for this sentiment of universality. So he was a universal person. His love was universal, his personality was universal, his ideas were universal, his impact was universal. He did not come. He says, I don't belong to India or any particular country. He was a universal man in the true sense of the term. And that universality came by his idea, concept of Advaita, or the supreme truth or unity, which can be found at the level of the spirit, at the level of consciousness, and not at the level of Prakriti. So, with that attitude, if we worship or try to understand this environmental change and all those issues which we are facing, we can't solve them by making some agreements and some kind of things. They are going to collapse unless you understand the underlying spiritual unity. Then the reverence for nature will increase, the reverence for Prakriti will increase, and that is how you can bring about a marked change in the attitude, in the way we destroy the environment, and we are so wanton in our attitude that we just don't bother about uh, environment and other issues. But they can be solved at a deeper level alone. That is what Swami Vivekananda believed. And Mayavati was the center where he believed these ideas will flourish. In fact, he started this Prabuddha Bharata, which Mrs. Savior in the beginning supported financially also. And then there's one more lady I forgot to mention, who was known as Sister Bhakti. That was the name given by later on by her guru Swami Akilananda in Boston. But she donated the entire money to build Belur temple. It was very difficult to get money. So she was the one who was responsible for the wonderful universal temple, the first universal temple incorporating all the architecture of the mosque, the church, and the Hindu temples and the Buddhist pagodas, everything fused together by one of Swami Vivekananda's brother disciples who was an engineer, Swami Vijnananandji. Swamiji spelled out the plan to him. And the project was such a big project, they were not able to collect money for that. And Helen Rubel, who was a Swiss lady but settled in America, she donated a huge amount. And she was one of the empowered women who helped propagate the mission and the universal ideas of Swamiji. They were all attracted by these universal ideas.
Wonderful. This is just the right note in which to end our wonderful conversation, Swamiji. I want to end with one little last point, which is that Swami Vivekananda, we are entering a new world, Swamiji, where of technology, of great change, of climate change, and of course, COVID-19, the pandemic, has shown us how dramatic that change could really be. And with global warming, more change is happening around us constantly. I want to end on a note that many people might not know. Swami Vivekananda, in his own lifetime, saw the brutal impact of plague. He, of course, was from the city of Calcutta, which had suffered too. And he actually wrote a sort of guide to how to tackle a pandemic like the plague. And when I read it during the COVID, the second wave and the first wave and second wave of COVID, I understood that many of his ideas that he spoke about really talked to us in the middle of the COVID pandemic once again, even though he was, of course, talking about the plague. And I wonder if you would like to end on that note, talk a little bit about this manifesto that Swami Vivekananda wrote on how to tackle pandemics.
Exactly. This plague manifesto which he wrote, all of us know that plague was a pandemic which frightened almost the entire Calcutta, if not the whole of Bengal, and people were running helter-skelter. So it was with the help of his very fearless devotees, devotees and the disciples, one of whom was Sister Navidita and Swami Sadananda, who used to be so faithful to his guru. So they were the pioneers who carried out the plague manifesto, where he was advising or requesting or uh, uh, asking the people not to be afraid of this pandemic and follow follow the right scientific methods or follow the medical advice, so that this plague can be controlled and not just panic and run away because of some superstition and other things. So these people physically started cleaning the streets of Calcutta. Sister Nivedita, with all her followers and Swamiji's followers and other monastic disciples, they tried to convince the people. She, in fact, herself nursed lot of children who were just abandoned, and because of this plague, people had died, and the children had nobody to look after them. So she, taking such a big risk, in fact, she went to the houses herself with Swami Sadananji, of course, and many other young volunteers whom she inspired. So this plague relief, which Swami Vivekananda started. After that, many such relief works were done. The famine, Great Bengal famine, where millions of people died. It was an artificial famine created, everybody knows. Even during those days, this inspiration which was provided by Swamiji by writing his plague manifesto, he first tried to inculcate a sense of fearlessness, that this life is transient. They alone live who live for others. That was his wonderful idea. He said, why should be you so cautious? If you fear death, then definitely you can't do any work. So you have to be fearless, but at the same time, not careless. You have to be fearless, but not careless. So on the other side, he said, take all the precautions, follow the scientific approach to handle this disease, but at the same time, don't panic. That was his message. So that was the wonderful thing he did. And as far as the environment is concerned, as I told you, he made a wonderful remark in his Raj Yoga, where he talks about the role of Prakriti. He says mankind exploits Prakriti, tries to grab everything. His greed makes man grab everything from Prakriti. But Prakriti has her final say. She says you have grabbed so many things which you cannot, you with closed fists, you grab everything and try to keep it with yourself. And uh, he says that nature or Prakriti will grab that person by the neck and make him open his hands and give out whatever he has grabbed unlawfully from nature. So that is a great lesson. And he says you have to cooperate with Prakriti. And as I told you before, his concept of Shakti Puja or Shakti worship, to revere nature as a manifestation of the divine Prakriti. And if you serve Prakriti, then Prakriti serves you to reach the goal of life. So that is a general message he gave. The implications of this idea, whether it is in the field of environment, handling the pandemic, or any other issue, they're all superficial issues. But if we go to the core of the problem and give up our greed and all the other passions which are making us exploit nature, environment, people, which people are also part of animals. We are all part of nature. It's one Prakriti, one continuous connection is there. That is the Prakriti which we are exploiting for our selfish purposes. Unless that goes, if unless people are educated or inspired by spiritual values, not to exploit Prakriti, this problem can be solved with a piecemeal approach, but the grassroots transformation can be uh, done only by going back to the spiritual values, where in the past in India, Shakti was worshipped with so much of reverence. Let us bring back the wonderful respect people had for nature, to live in harmony with nature, respect Prakriti, respect Shakti, and then find our way out, and we reach the goal of life, which is true freedom. Not only physical freedom, mental freedom, but spiritual freedom, which is the goal of every human being.
That's a wonderful, wonderful note, Swamiji, to end this wonderful conversation. As always, in conversations with you, I have learned a lot. The more you learn about Swami Vivekananda, the modern monk, the better it is, and the more one feels enlightened. There's always something that one doesn't know, I've noticed. Over the years, one has read so much about him, one has written so much about him, but there are always elements one doesn't know. And of course, Swami Vivekananda's arousing words, arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. We're going to end on that note. Thank you very much, Swamiji. Thank you very much, Amish. Thank you, the Nehru Center in London. Always a wonderful host. Delighted to join the Nehru Center in this program once again to celebrate in India National Youth Day and, of course, around the world, Swami Vivekananda's birthday. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
It was wonderful meeting all of you. Let us hope that Swamiji gives us the inspiration to not only propagate or preach his message, but follow it ourselves, so that we can be uh, better individuals, useful to the world. Thank you.